Unbelievable. Elon Musk has just revealed a brand new rocket engine that's not only more powerful, but also 10 times cheaper than SpaceX's Merlin 1D. It's called the Raptor 4, and it could change everything we know about space travel, making a ticket to Mars as affordable as a plane ride here on Earth. So, what exactly makes the Raptor 4 so revolutionary? And when will it finally make its debut? Let's find out in today's episode of Alpha Tech. One thing many people don't realize: SpaceX didn't become the world's top private space company by luck. One of their biggest advantages is a relentless drive for innovation and breakthrough technology. Take Starship, for example. Before version 3 had even flown, SpaceX was already rolling out plans for Starship version 4, a model that's not just visually different, but also significantly more powerful. And it's not just the rocket itself. The upgrades run hand in hand with their engines. Raptor 3 hadn't even flown yet, still in testing, when Raptor 4 was already fully designed and quietly under development. And this isn't speculation. The man himself, Elon Musk, revealed it. On November 3rd, Musk shared a rare insight on X, saying, "Raptor 3 will probably be 2 to 4 times better than Merlin in dollars per ton of thrust, and will exceed Merlin in thrust-to-weight ratio. Raptor 4 should beat Merlin by more than 10 times in dollars per ton of thrust, with further improvement in thrust-to-weight ratio and specific impulse." A company leader like Elon Musk, of course, knows his engines inside and out. From the information he's shared, we can start to see just how revolutionary Raptor 4 could be. First off, Musk highlights that the cost per ton of thrust is a key metric for evaluating an engine's economic efficiency. Take Merlin, the engine currently powering Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. Merlin, the engine powering Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, is already optimized for low cost, but Raptor 3 promises to be 2 to 4 times cheaper, if Merlin costs around $1 million per ton of thrust. Raptor 3 could bring that down to somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 per ton. And Raptor 4 takes it even further, with Musk saying the cost could be as low as roughly $100,000 per ton, making it 3 to 4 times cheaper than Raptor 3. To put that in context, imagine SpaceX using Starship version 4 to transport people and cargo to Mars. This version would use 9 Raptor 4 engines, 3 sea-level, and 6 vacuum-optimized. Each Raptor 4 produces roughly 300 to 330 tons of thrust, giving a total of about 2,700 to 2,970 tons combined. That's more than enough power to deliver 100 tons of cargo to Mars. The challenge, however, is that Starship would still require around 5 in-orbit refuelings, which, of course, adds extra cost. But if we look purely at the engines, things get interesting. With 9 Raptor 4s generating nearly 3,000 tons of thrust, the cost per ton of thrust drops sharply to around $100,000, as Musk mentioned. That puts the total propulsion system at roughly $300 million for a 100-ton Mars mission, a surprisingly small number. But that's only the cost of the engines on a single Starship upper stage. Once you add in the fuel, the vehicle manufacturing, and the ground operations, each Mars mission could easily climb into the multi-billion-dollar range. Still, even when looking at just this dollar per ton of thrust metric, the leap from Raptor 3 to Raptor 4 is staggering. This single improvement could shave hundreds of millions of dollars off every Mars mission. Multiply that across dozens of flights, and the savings become astronomical. That's why Raptor 4 isn't just an upgrade. It's a true breakthrough over Raptor 3. Oh, wait a second. How do we even know that Raptor 4 will have around 300 tons of thrust? Well, that's also from Elon Musk himself. And what's interesting is, he actually mentioned it as far back as late 2024. He said, "When Raptor reaches 300 tons of thrust at liftoff, which Raptor 3 can probably do, certainly Raptor 4 will, then it will have 10,000 metric tons of thrust at liftoff, which is 22.5 million pounds force, almost exactly 3 times Saturn V inches." To be honest, if Musk was being modest with that number, it wouldn't be surprising, because with 33 Raptor 4 engines, the actual total thrust could come close to 11,000 tons. That's right, not only more efficient, but also about 16% more powerful than Raptor 3. And it's not just about raw power. SpaceX is also aiming to improve every other performance metric. Back in August, Musk said that Raptor 3 and the vacuum variant of Raptor 4, with its oversized nozzle, could reach a specific impulse of 380 seconds. Meanwhile, Raptor 3's chamber pressure is already expected to hit 350 bar, the highest among any operational engine today. Raptor 4 might push that limit even further. Another major advantage of Raptor 4 will be simplicity. With Raptor 3, SpaceX already made a big leap in reducing complexity by integrating or eliminating many small, failure-prone parts. Raptor 4 is expected to push that even further. A cleaner, more compact design doesn't just make the engine more reliable, it also shortens production time and cuts costs dramatically. These refinements directly address the issues that plagued Raptor 2, minimizing the risk of failures under extreme conditions. Meanwhile, the cooling system, already improved in Raptor 3, will be fine-tuned again for Raptor 4, helping it withstand intense heat and pressure, while boosting both durability and efficiency. With every generation of Raptor, SpaceX moves closer to its ultimate goal, and Raptor 4 might just be the engine that finally makes true interplanetary missions possible. One of the most groundbreaking changes in this pursuit of simplicity lies in manufacturing. SpaceX is phasing out flanges and bolts, components that are prone to leaks and mechanical wear, and replacing them with fully welded joints. This approach creates stronger, leak-resistant connections while reducing weight and overall system complexity. By removing hundreds of small parts and unnecessary subsystems, each engine becomes significantly lighter. Those flanges and bolts don't just add mass, they also trap heat, reducing performance. Thanks to increased reliability, SpaceX has even eliminated the traditional heat shield on Raptor 3, something Elon Musk proudly showed off in a recent presentation. And the numbers tell the story. The original Raptor 1 weighed around 2 metric tons, Raptor 2 dropped to 1.6 tons, and Raptor 3 came in at just 1.525 tons. We don't yet know the exact figure for Raptor 4, but it's safe to say it'll be even lighter and more efficient. When you multiply that weight reduction across dozens of engines on each launch vehicle, the difference becomes massive. A lighter vehicle means better performance, a crucial factor for those ambitious missions to the Moon and Mars. That push for simplicity has also led to a massive increase in production speed. Back in the early days, it took around 11 days to build a single Raptor 1 engine. That was cut down to just 2 days with Raptor 2, and eventually only 1 day. With its cleaner and more efficient design, Raptor 3 is expected to push that even further. It might not have reached peak production speed just yet, but the acceleration is obvious. By May, the 20th Raptor 3 had already been spotted, less than a year after the first one debuted in August. That pace is only going to improve as SpaceX ramps up its manufacturing facilities. Supporting that momentum, SpaceX confirmed that Raptor 3 engines have now completed over 6,000 hot fire tests, accumulating more than 40,000 seconds of runtime at the company's McGregor test site. This progress is crucial for SpaceX's vision of launching Starship at a high cadence. A simpler design directly translates to less post-flight maintenance. Fewer parts mean fewer potential failure points, which in turn allows for faster turnaround times, something absolutely essential if Starship is ever going to achieve full reusability and rapid launch frequency. Right now, the record for reusability stands at 3 flights with the Raptor VI 2-314, also known as the Raptor PI. But future versions are expected to go far beyond that as the technology matures. Another major outcome of this simplification is cost reduction. Operations and maintenance become faster and more efficient, while production costs drop dramatically. Current estimates put the price of a single Raptor engine at $1 to $2 million, already quite low by aerospace standards. But Raptor 3 could bring that number down to as little as $600,000, or even $500,000 per engine. That combination of low cost and high performance makes the Raptor line stand out across the entire industry. And if Raptor 3 is any indication, Raptor 4 will take that even further. A fully integrated, no-nonsense design that's lighter, more reliable, faster to build, and requires minimal maintenance. Each new generation of Raptor proves just how powerful the simplify everything philosophy can be. As Musk often says, the best part is no part. And that mindset doesn't just apply to engines or rockets. It runs through every level of SpaceX's engineering and operations. This pioneering approach has left competitors trailing behind. Take Blue Origin's BE-4, for example. It also runs on methane and boasts around 250 tons of thrust, slightly higher than Raptor 2, but in every other metric, it's simply not keeping up. The debut of Raptor 3 made that comparison feel outdated, and with Raptor 4 on the horizon, the gap is only expected to widen even more. So, the biggest question now is, when will the Raptor 4 finally make its debut? Well, as of now, the Raptor 3 is still in full-scale production. Recently, more and more Raptor 3 engines have been spotted on trucks leaving McGregor, heading straight for Starbase. That's a clear sign SpaceX is ramping up engine deliveries, at least 39 units, to Power Booster 18 and Ship 39, both of which are being assembled at a remarkable pace. Soon, both stages will be fully equipped, paving the way for the first-ever flight of the Starship version 3 with Raptor 3 engines, expected in early next year. Now, if history is any guide, every new Raptor generation has emerged roughly 18 months after the last one's first flight. That means, by mid-2027, or even earlier, we could witness SpaceX releasing a test video of the brand new Raptor 4. A late 2027 launch timeline fits perfectly, since Elon Musk himself once hinted that Starship V4 could fly around that same year. This isn't just a wild guess, it's a logical estimate based on SpaceX's mission roadmap. By 2028, SpaceX is expected to complete its first crewed lunar landings under NASA's Artemis program. And after those historic milestones, the company will need a far more capable version of Starship, one powerful enough to carry larger crews and heavier cargo, as SpaceX begins building a sustainable lunar base. That time frame also aligns with Musk's long-term vision for Mars. According to him, this will be the period when SpaceX starts deploying the first systems on the Martian surface, following successful demonstration missions that prove Starship can safely reach and land on the Red Planet. Behind SpaceX's success isn't just the brilliant leadership of Elon Musk, it's also the thousands of key people who keep pushing the company forward every single day. And of course, the most prominent among them is Gwynne Shotwell, a phenomenal leader who practically carries the workload of 3 executives, and has been instrumental in securing multi-billion-dollar contracts with NASA and the U.S. Department of Defense. But she's not the only powerhouse at SpaceX. Another key figure is Kiko Donchev, currently the vice president of launch. Donchev joined SpaceX back in May 2010, starting out by leading the development of lithium-ion batteries for the Dragon spacecraft and Falcon 9 rocket. Thanks to his work, the now iconic Falcon 9 can achieve hundreds of successful launches per year, something once thought impossible. Over time, he rose to oversee all launch operations across every SpaceX vehicle, and it was this same brilliance that brought him to the Space Economy Summit 2025, a major space event held in London on November 5th. During his speech, Donchev confirmed that Starship Flight 12 is expected to launch as early as January 2026. That announcement officially closed the door on any Starship flights happening in 2025. While that might disappoint some fans, it also marks a major milestone in Starship's evolution. 2025 belongs to Starship V2, and 2026 will usher in Starship VI3. That means SpaceX has been upgrading the Starship line every single year. Pretty impressive, right? And when Kiko mentioned the earliest possible launch being in January, my personal guess is that it could happen around mid-January, maybe even on January 16, 2026, exactly the same date as Starship Flight 7, the first mission of the V2 era. If that turns out to be true, it'd make for a perfect symbolic moment, and the media would have a great story to amplify SpaceX's growing reputation. So, what about you? When do you think the next Starship flight will happen? Drop your prediction down below. If that schedule holds, it means SpaceX still has a little over 2 months to prepare 4 key elements for the mission: Ship 39, Booster 18, Launch Pad 2, and the Massey test site. So, will that be enough time? Well, it might actually be faster than we think. Let's start with Ship 39. The latest update shows that it's already been fully stacked with all 4 sections and is now standing inside Gigabay 2. On November 7th, the vehicle was even lifted and set down over the transfer tube-installed jig, marking another big step forward. What's left now is mainly installing the aft and forward flaps, attaching the heat shield tiles, and then running a cryo test, a crucial step to verify whether the new fuel tanks can withstand extreme cryogenic pressure. Based on that timeline, the vehicle could be ready within a month to a month and a half, meaning it might complete its cryo test by mid-December. After that, the final step will be mounting the payload and installing the Flight Termination System, FTS, once it rolls back to Gigabay 2. If everything stays on track, the vehicle is expected to reach its fully flight-ready state by January 10th, roughly 1 week before launch. Now, let's talk about Booster 18, the super heavy stage that, so far, hasn't begun testing yet. Recent progress shows that its forward section has been fitted with an upgraded hot staging ring, but the booster still hasn't been rolled out to the launch site. According to Kiko Donchev, that rollout is expected to happen within the next few days or weeks. Once it's out, B-18 will first undergo cryogenic testing at the Massey test site, which now features a fully installed booster quick disconnect system. This test will mark the first demonstration of the new V3 hardware and ground integration systems. If everything stays on schedule, the cryo test could wrap up by mid-November, followed by engine installation toward the end of the month. After that, B-18 will move to Pad 2 for its static fire test, where all engines will be ignited together for the first time. Once the static fire is complete, the booster will head back to Gigabay 1 for detailed inspections and final integration work. For now, the booster's timeline still looks reasonable for a potential end-of-year launch, at least on paper. However, the same can't quite be said for the ship and ground systems. The launch pad's readiness remains a critical factor. Flight 12 will be the first mission ever launched from Pad 2. Over the past week, teams have been busy finishing up the new launch mount, adding additional shielding across the base structure to protect it from the brutal forces of a super heavy liftoff, something Pad 1 knows all too well. Venting activity was recently spotted near Pad 2's tank farm, as SpaceX continues verifying that all systems are functioning properly ahead of the first test campaign for Block 3 vehicles. Just last weekend, water deluge tests were also observed, with massive streams of water spraying into the flame trench, a clear sign that the system is being fine-tuned for its first booster trial. At this pace, the pad may only be ready for booster testing before the end of the year. However, several major upgrades are underway, including a reinforced orbital launch mount, upgraded chopsticks, a strengthened flame trench, and expanded manifolds, all clearly designed with long-term, high-frequency Starship operations in mind. These improvements will form the foundation for the VIA 3 era and beyond, enabling future Starship variants to launch dozens of missions more efficiently and safely, while also reducing the time needed for routine maintenance between flights. And finally, the Massey test site at Starbase, Texas is now almost fully rebuilt, following the major explosion of Ship 36 in June 2025, which severely damaged the test stand and methane storage systems. As of early November 2025, SpaceX has completed most of the repairs and upgrades, including modular, easy-to-maintain tanks, liquid nitrogen ventilation fans, a new protective bunker, and repairs to the flame deflector. The site is now back in operation for Block 3 Starship testing. On November 7th, a new version of the Quick Disconnect was spotted at Massey, initially set to be tested on Starship via 3 aft test tank 39.1, which rolled out of the Star Factory on the same day. This vehicle is expected to be moved to Massey for cryogenic structural proof testing, verifying the new V3 design. Despite the previous delays caused by the catastrophic incident, Massey is now ready to support Flight 12 and the upcoming Block 3 missions. At the end of the day, taking all these factors into account, it's clear that Flight 12 won't happen before 2026. From one perspective, this delay might feel disappointing. After the successes of Flights 10 and 11, many had hoped SpaceX would close out the year on a high note. The remaining 2.5 months seemed like a prime window to build momentum and showcase the capabilities of the V3 system. Missing this launch window also impacts the broader schedule. SpaceX has set ambitious goals for 2026, including full V3 demonstrations, achieving orbit, deploying real payloads, and testing the recovery of both stages. Each of these milestones requires a dedicated flight campaign. Any delays now risk compressing next year's schedule and could push back major objectives like refueling infrastructure or the first uncrewed lunar landing demonstration. However, there's another side to the story, one that suggests this delay could ultimately be beneficial. V3 is not just another prototype iteration. It represents the transition from experimental hardware to operational capability. Taking extra time to validate all ground systems before the first flight can help prevent costly failures down the line. Careful preparation of the booster, spacecraft, and launch pad will ensure that when V3 finally lifts off, it does so with the reliability and precision needed for the next phase of the program. Moreover, by officially launching V3 in 2026, SpaceX establishes a clear distinction between development eras. The incremental improvements seen in version 1 and version 2 were essential learning steps, but version 3 is where those lessons come together. It will feature optimized engines, refined structures, and streamlined ground operations. This clear transition also sets the stage for an even more advanced V4, expected to follow in 2027. Now, while SpaceX is making major strides, there's even more exciting news on the leadership front at NASA. Jared Isaacman is making a comeback. A few days ago, former President Trump officially renominated Isaacman for the position, signaling renewed confidence in his leadership potential. On Truth Social, Trump wrote, "Jared's passion for space, astronaut experience, and dedication to pushing the boundaries of exploration, unlocking the mysteries of the universe, and advancing the new space economy make him ideally suited to lead NASA into a bold new era." Isaacman responded on X with sincere gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity. It will be an honor to serve my country under your leadership." This renomination comes as no surprise to many in the aerospace community. Isaacman has built a reputation as a capable and pioneering leader, earning respect from influential figures such as Elon Musk and several former NASA astronauts. His proven track record as both a businessman and astronaut makes him stand out. Isaacman is perhaps best known as the founder of Shift4, a successful payment processing company that turned him into a billionaire. But his achievements extend far beyond business. He has organized, funded, and commanded 2 private astronaut missions aboard SpaceX spacecraft, demonstrating his commitment to advancing human spaceflight. Most notably, his Polaris Dawn mission included the first-ever private spacewalk, setting a new benchmark in commercial space exploration. Although Isaacman still needs Senate confirmation before officially taking office, his chances appear strong. Few candidates combine the leadership ability, astronaut experience, and business success that he brings to the table. For SpaceX, Isaacman's return could be a decisive advantage. His close relationship with the company and with Musk could help stabilize the current uncertainty surrounding the Artemis III lunar mission. Recent NASA leadership decisions have introduced ambiguity after Sean Duffy reopened competition for the lunar lander contract, putting SpaceX's position under review. If confirmed, Isaacman's appointment could bring a renewed alignment between NASA and SpaceX, helping ensure continued progress toward returning humans to the moon. In addition, Vast Space, a close partner of SpaceX, hit a major milestone on November 2, 2025, with the successful launch of Haven Demo, their first technology demonstration satellite, aboard SpaceX's Bandwagon for flight from Cape Canaveral. At the end of April, China launched a 3-person crew on the Shenzhou 20 mission to the Tiangong space station. They'd been up there for over 6 months, and it was finally time to wrap up their long journey and head home. So, at the end of October, China sent up a new crew aboard Shenzhou 21, which successfully docked with Tiangong on October 31st. A few days later, after handing over duties to the new team, the 6 astronauts celebrated together with a roast chicken cooked in the station's first-ever space oven, a moment of joy and laughter for all of them. On the morning of the 4th, they officially handed over command, and by the 5th, the 3 Shenzhou 20 astronauts boarded their spacecraft to prepare for the return trip. That's when ground control detected some unusual data from the system. Suspecting a collision with space debris, Beijing's control center issued an emergency order. "Stop, open the hatch, return to the station." The crew had to turn back, but luckily everyone remained safe. Investigations later confirmed that the culprit was indeed space debris, likely from a defunct satellite. The irony? Just a month earlier, the same crew had spent hours outside the station on a spacewalk, installing a debris protection system, and yet, It wasn't the station that got hit, it was their own spacecraft. On November 11th, CMSA released a summary of the crew's status stating, after the Shenzhou 20 manned spacecraft's return mission was postponed, the project team, adhering to the principle that human life and safety come first, immediately activated emergency plans and measures. They added that all ongoing work is progressing steadily and orderly according to plan. However, the statement didn't reveal exactly what went wrong or where the problem was, perhaps an attempt to protect their reputation. Faced with this situation, the Shenzhou 20 crew would have to stay on the station. It wasn't clear for how long, but for now, this would disrupt the schedule, since both crews had to remain on board together. With 6 astronauts instead of the usual 3, the consumption of oxygen, water, and food would naturally rise, and if this lasted for months, it could become a serious problem. So China proposed 2 options. One was to send the Shenzhou 21 spacecraft back immediately with the new crew taking over, and the other was to call in another spacecraft for a rescue mission. As for the first option, this is the top priority. Shenzhou 21 was already docked, so the Shenzhou 20 crew could simply undock and head home immediately. But this comes with a problem. If they leave right away, the Shenzhou 21 crew loses their lifeboat, their emergency escape vehicle. They'd be left with only the Tiangong station as shelter, and would have to wait 8 to 9 days for Shenzhou 22 to launch as a replacement. That's why there's always at least one operational spacecraft stationed at Tiangong. Plus, each crew spends about 6 months in orbit, giving ground control enough time to maintain and repair the spacecraft for the next rotation. Sending Shenzhou 22 immediately after Shenzhou 21 just launched would disrupt the entire control schedule and the mission plan for 2026. Complicated, right? That's why CMSA is currently focused on checking Shenzhou 20 first. If it's seriously damaged, it could return uncrewed. The second option is to call in help from other agencies like Roscosmos. That makes sense since China and Russia have openly partnered ever since the US imposed sanctions on Russia over the Ukraine conflict. Another potential partner? SpaceX, and yes, relying on a rival and a company whose ideas China has often been accused of copying, does feel a bit unusual, but it's something they'd have to accept just to deal with the situation at hand, otherwise the Tiangong schedule would be thrown off. SpaceX has the Dragon spacecraft, the safest and most advanced vehicle for launching to the ISS, and they've already rescued astronauts like Suni and Butch before, so there's really no reason for China to hesitate if they wanted SpaceX's help. Being a private company rather than a government agency, SpaceX could mount a rescue mission as soon as China pays. The problem is, Dragon is designed to dock with the ISS according to NASA standards, while Tiangong uses China's own system. That means Dragon would need a special adapter, and installing one isn't straightforward. There's even a chance the entire docking module design would need modifications. This would take a huge amount of time, money, and effort. If China really had to go this route, they'd have to provide SpaceX with blueprints, send their engineers to modify a Dragon, and run extensive ground tests. So, while the idea of SpaceX coming to rescue China sounds good on paper, in reality, it's far from practical. Even if China turned to Roscosmos, the situation would be even less feasible. The only suitable vehicle for transporting astronauts would be the Soyuz, whose design is even more outdated than Dragon. So, for now, the best option is still to wait and analyze the fault on Shenzhou 20. If the spacecraft is seriously damaged and unsafe, the crew can ride home on Shenzhou 21, accepting that Tiangong's future schedule will be disrupted by the domino effect of this incident. But it's also a costly lesson for China, showing that Tiangong is now entering the same growing up phase that the ISS went through many years ago. The Chinese crew will gain valuable experience from this, learning how to handle similar emergencies in the future. Overall, this whole situation highlights the key difference between Tiangong and the ISS. The ISS has always been an international partnership since day one. It's been visited by a wide variety of spacecraft: Dragon, Soyuz, Progress, Starliner, Cygnus, and soon Dream Chaser. Altogether, more than 240 missions have docked there over the past 25 years. China, on the other hand, only has Shenzhou for crew transport and Tianzhou for cargo. So, when something goes wrong, they simply don't have the same network of backup options or rescue capabilities as the ISS. In fact, incidents like this have happened plenty of times on the ISS. One of the most famous was the Soyuz MS-09 incident back in 2018. At around 3 a.m. on August 30th, the piercing wail of a pressure alarm shattered the silence aboard the ISS. 6 astronauts, asleep in their sleeping bags along Harmony's passageway, woke up in a panic. Alexander Gerst, a German astronaut with ESA, was the first to float out, eyes still burning from the flashing red lights. On the central display, one number made everyone's blood run cold. The station's pressure was steadily dropping, 0.8 millimeters of mercury per hour. If they didn't find and seal the leak soon, the ISS would run out of breathable air in less than 10 days. Mission Control in Houston and Moscow both gave the same urgent command: find the leak, immediately. NASA astronaut and physician Serena Onion Chancellor, together with Commander Drew Fustel, began tracing a faint hissing noise that was barely audible. They shut off all fans, floated in complete silence, and pressed their ears against the aluminum hull. Eventually, the sound led them to the orbital module of the Soyuz MS-09, the very spacecraft that would bring 3 of them home in just a few months. There it was, a perfectly round 2-millimeter hole in the outer wall, edges jagged like it had been drilled by a bullet. Through that tiny opening, air from the ISS was hissing out into the vacuum of space. Later calculations showed that the micrometeoroid or debris that caused the puncture had hit at a speed of about 28,000 kilometers per hour, roughly the same as a rifle bullet fired in a vacuum. Even worse, the hole was in the orbital module, part of the spacecraft that wouldn't burn up during re-entry, but remained attached to the re-entry capsule. If that hole wasn't perfectly sealed, 2,000 degrees Celsius plasma from Earth's atmosphere could shoot straight inside like a blowtorch. Then Serena took rolls of gold Kapton tape, heat-resistant to 400 degrees Celsius, and layered them over the hole. Fustel injected a thick Russian epoxy sealant known as the space leak patch. Commander Oleg Artemyev held them steady as they worked. Slowly, the hissing faded, then silence. The pressure drop stopped. It was only a temporary fix. 3 months later, on December 6th, Russian cosmonauts Oleg Kononenko and Alexei Ovchinin performed a 7-hour, 45-minute EVA, the longest of that year. They climbed along the Soyuz MS-09, docked to the Rassvet module, peeled away insulation, and applied a 0.8 millimeter titanium patch. 12 titanium rivets, 3 layers of heat-resistant silicone sealant. The repair was completed at 4:12 a.m., Moscow time, exactly 99 days after the leak was found. 2 weeks later, on December 20th, Alexander Gerst, Serena Onion Chancellor, and Sergei Prokopyev boarded that same Soyuz, the one that had once been punctured, closed the hatch, and undocked from the ISS. 3 hours later, they landed safely on the snowy plains of Kazakhstan. The 2-millimeter hole was sealed tight. Not a single trace of plasma had entered. Later, Dmitry Rogozin, then the head of Roscosmos, publicly admitted, "If that hole had been even 2.5 millimeters wide, we would never have allowed the crew to fly home and that ship luck was on our side." That incident was a stark reminder of how fragile human life can be in orbit. And now, with Shenzhou 20 facing its own crisis, that lesson feels more relevant than ever. Because in space, nothing you do ever truly disappears. On January 11, 2007, an SC-19 missile lifted off from China launch site and smashed straight into Fengyun 1C, a 750-kilogram Chinese weather satellite orbiting 865 kilometers above Earth. In a single moment, that intact satellite shattered into more than 3,000 trackable fragments, each larger than a golf ball and an estimated 150,000 smaller pieces under 1 centimeter wide. All of them tore across low Earth orbit at over 10 kilometers per second. It was the single largest debris-generating event in human history, one that still hasn't been surpassed to this day. The international backlash was immediate. The United States called it the most irresponsible act in the history of space. NASA confirmed that fragments from Fengyun 1EC made up nearly 15% of all tracked objects in orbit at the time. The UK, Canada, Japan, and Australia all condemned the test. NASA debris expert Nicholas Johnson said, bluntly, This is the worst satellite breakup ever in terms of long-term space debris. China remained silent for 12 days before finally admitting to the test, insisting it wasn't targeted at any nation. But no one believed that. The consequences still linger 18 years later. Thousands of Fengyun 1C fragments continue to drift through orbit, forcing the ISS to perform more than 30 debris avoidance maneuvers over the years. So, how exactly will SpaceX pull off that test landing on the moon? Let's find out in today's episode of Alpha Tech. Just a few days ago, SpaceX released a detailed update on the Starship human landing system, highlighting 49 development milestones that have been completed on time or even ahead of schedule. From that report, it's clear that the vehicle is now in the phase of manufacturing and integrated system testing built around the Block 3 Starship, which has been optimized specifically for the Artemis missions. Although not every detail was made public, the update gave us plenty of clues. The major components already developed include the crew cabin with avionics power systems, crew interfaces, and the environmental control and life support system. There's also the Orion docking adapter, and perhaps most importantly, the prototype landing legs, currently being tested on simulated lunar terrain. And of course, there's the Raptor engines, though. That part hardly needs any introduction, since SpaceX has already proven their capability many times before. The assembly of all these components into a fully integrated HLS Starship is expected to begin soon, which still keeps the program on track for Artemis III in 2027. However, based on the current pace, NASA might push the mission to 2028 or even 2029 to allow more preparation time. Because landing on the moon is anything but easy, it takes precision, patience, and a whole lot of testing. So, before Starship is ready to fly on an actual Artemis III mission, what does SpaceX still need to do? Well, first and foremost, SpaceX has to prove that its lunar lander can actually land on the moon. That's easier said than done, because the entire flight architecture is incredibly complex. It requires 4 different spacecraft working in sync: the HLS lander, a tanker, a propellant depot, and NASA's Orion capsule. However, according to NASA's official roadmap, SpaceX only needs to complete 1 uncrewed demonstration landing before Artemis III to earn human rating certification. And that's exactly the loophole SpaceX could use to speed things up in 2026. Under the HLS Option B contract, the company is allowed to perform a simplified demo mission using only the HLS lander and a single upgraded tanker without the depot or Orion. In that mission, Starship would launch atop Super Heavy from Boca Chica, perform 4 to 6 refueling operations in low Earth orbit over 1 to 2 weeks, then make the long journey to NRHO before descending to the lunar South Pole. It might sound simple, but it's not. SpaceX still has a long checklist to go through before that first lunar touchdown becomes reality. First, Starship V3 and Super Heavy Block 2 will need to fly as a full stack at least 3 to 5 times from Boca Chica, not just to achieve over 95% launch reliability, but also to prove that Mechazilla can perfectly catch both the booster and the upper stage. That's a make-or-break milestone for NASA's confidence in SpaceX's reusable system, since the Starship tanker is designed to fly again and again. This test campaign alone could take 3 to 4 months, putting the full tower catch demonstration around April 2026, just as Elon Musk himself hinted. Once that phase is complete, the second chapter begins orbital refueling. 2 Starships, 1 tanker and 1 depot, will rendezvous in low Earth orbit, perform soft capture, then hard dock, and begin transferring hundreds of tons of cryogenic propellant in microgravity. Only after 3 flawless fuel transfers with no leaks, no freezing, and no system failures can SpaceX move on to the third chapter, proving that the propellant can hibernate in orbit for at least 30 days with boil-off below 0.1% per day, thanks to onboard cryocoolers. That phase will take time, too likely wrapping up by July or August 2026. Meanwhile, over at Starbase, the full Starship HLS system will be assembled and go through ground testings in parallel with the refueling trials, probably around March 2026. That timeline makes sense. Many of the components are already built, so assembly shouldn't take long. During this phase, the 6 Raptor vacuum engines could be test-fired down to just 20% throttle, pushing the limits of precision landing control. The environmental control and life support system will need to prove it can sustain a crew for at least 30 days straight. The pneumatic landing legs must handle lunar regolith without collapsing, while both the Dragon Eye and LiDAR navigation systems will be tested inside vacuum chambers and on simulated lunar surfaces. A prototype Starship might even attempt an analog landing here on Earth, touching down at less than half a meter per second, dust pluming along predicted trajectories, legs absorbing the impact perfectly. Only if those tests are flawless will NASA give the green light for the real HLS to launch into low Earth orbit, where the entire system will be checked out in space for the first time. If HLS ground testing wraps up around July, then August becomes the golden window. That's when Chapter 5 truly gets intense. SpaceX will attempt between 4 and 6 full-scale refueling flights, topping off the orbital depot with roughly 1,500 tons of propellant. By then, if Pad 1 at Starbase is operational, Starships could be launching from 3 pads simultaneously, 2 in Texas and 1 at LC-39A in Florida. That means the whole sequence could move quickly. Each tanker rendezvous and transfer takes only 2 to 3 hours, so in theory, the depot could be fully fueled in just 2 days if everything goes perfectly. But SpaceX always plans for contingencies. A 7-day buffer allows time to inspect the depot, verify stability, and ensure there are no leaks or thermal issues. Only then would HLS be cleared to launch rendezvous with the depot and load just enough propellant for TLI, LOI, and a soft lunar landing. Once refueling is complete, HLS will begin its 3 to 5 day journey to NRHO, testing optical navigation and DSN communications along the way. And if every system stays green, the final chapter begins an uncrewed landing on the rim of Shackleton Crater by late 2026, returning images, thermal data, and regolith samples. Proof that Starship can touch down on the moon, no Orion, no crew, marking a crucial step toward NASA's human-rated certification for Artemis III. And that's the roadmap for SpaceX's first moon landing in 2026. Exciting, isn't it? If you can't wait to see that moment happen, drop a 1 in the comments below. Now, here's something even more interesting. While some NASA officials like former Administrator Jim Bridenstine and Sean Duffy have called the HLS architecture too complex, Elon Musk and the SpaceX team actually agree. That's why they've submitted a simplified lunar mission architecture to NASA for review, one that's not only easier to execute but also safer for astronauts. On their official site, SpaceX stated, "In response to the latest calls we've shared and are formally assessing a simplified mission architecture and concept of operations that we believe will result in a faster return to the moon while simultaneously improving crew safety. If approved, we'll finally get to see exactly how this new approach works and how it could reshape the future of lunar exploration. But actually, we don't need to wait to imagine what it might look like. According to experts, the Artemis III mission is currently complex in 2 major ways. First, it requires multiple refueling operations between Starship tankers and the Starship depot in low Earth orbit. Second, it involves repeated docking maneuvers between HLS and Orion in lunar orbit. So, if you had to simplify one of those 2, which would you remove? Obviously, orbital refueling isn't optional. The Starship HLS needs around 1,200 to 1,500 tons of cryogenic propellant to make the full journey from low Earth orbit to NRHO, land softly on the moon with a 100-ton payload and then lift off again. No spacecraft in history could carry that much fuel from Earth without sacrificing reusability or safety. That leaves the second one, the complex series of dockings between Orion and HLS. And based on recent analysis and reports from industry insiders, that's exactly what SpaceX's simplified architecture is expected to eliminate. The idea here is that instead of launching the crew aboard Orion, they could ride directly inside the HLS from the start. That would eliminate one of the most complicated steps of the mission, the multiple docking between Orion and the lunar lander, leaving only a single docking event when the HLS returns from the moon. However, there's a serious challenge. The HLS currently has no launch escape system. For comparison, Crew Dragon is equipped with Super Draco thrusters that can push the capsule to safety in just half a second if Falcon 9 fails, Orion has its launch abort tower, which can pull the capsule away from SLS in case of an emergency. So if astronauts were to launch directly on HLS, the vehicle would need its own abort and crew safety system, one capable of separating the crew cabin in under a second if Super Heavy fails. The seats would need shock-absorbing structures, and there must be independent oxygen and life support supplies for emergency use. Adding all that would undoubtedly increase cost and engineering complexity. But if this approach truly makes the mission architecture simpler and safer, it might be a trade-off worth making. And perhaps it's no coincidence that, just as SpaceX moves closer to its first lunar landing, Elon Musk himself seems to be undergoing a major shift in focus. For years, he publicly dismissed the moon as a distraction from his ultimate dream of reaching Mars. Back in January 2025, he even said, "We're going straight to Mars. The moon is a distraction." But now that tone has changed completely. Musk is suddenly turning his full attention toward the moon, treating it as a major milestone, a crucial stepping stone for humanity's future. In just a few short weeks between late October and early November 2025, Musk flooded X with posts about his plan to build Moonbase Alpha, the first permanent base on the lunar surface, claiming that Starship will be the vehicle to bring hundreds of people there. While his reasons remain unclear, two core objectives stand out. First, the moon's extreme environment, glass-sharp regolith temperature swings of around 250 degrees, and 28-day light cycles makes it far harsher than Mars. If humans can survive, Musk argues that would be living proof we can thrive on Mars. Second, as Musk recently wrote, "The importance of the moon for scaling AI didn't occur to me until we did the scaling math on Earth, to figure out what it would take to launch over 1 terawatt per year of orbital AI. Overall, this isn't just a tactical change, it's a transformation of vision. For Musk, the moon is no longer a pit stop on the way to Mars. It's becoming the launch pad for Mars and for the future of artificial intelligence itself. It's the end of an era. Launch Pad 1. The legendary site that hosted 11 Starship launches is reaching the final chapter of its life. The familiar six-legged OLM, the roaring water deluge system, the towering Mechazilla arms, and all those massive fuel lines are now being dismantled. Not because they failed, but because SpaceX is moving on. The pad still works perfectly fine and could easily handle dozens more flights, but it's being retired to make way for progress, the transition from Starship V2 to Starship V3. These massive structures simply weren't built to meet the technical demands of the next-generation vehicle. First, let's take a look at the massive structure rising at Starbase the Gigabay. This will be the heart of Starship production in the future, where the most advanced Starships will be built. Over the past week, steel columns and beams have been going up non-stop, marking major progress on Crane Tower 4 and the main frame of the building. This is just the beginning. The structure is expected to rise to around 116 meters once completed. After the main steel skeleton is in place, SpaceX will move on to installing crossbeams and horizontal supports to strengthen the frame, followed by roofing and wall panels made of steel sheets, glass, and insulation materials to protect the interior from Florida's harsh weather. Inside the team will install lighting, ventilation, and safety systems, as well as office and meeting spaces on the upper floors. The entire construction process is estimated to take 12 to 18 months, depending on the build speed and technical challenges. But given SpaceX's track record, they've built dozens of massive facilities already. It likely won't take that long. Once complete, the Gigabay will enable SpaceX to ramp up production dramatically from 1 Starship per week, eventually to 1 per day, just as Elon Musk once envisioned. Now, let's move the tank farm, where crews have already ripped out critical ground support hardware. They sacrificed 2 basket strainers, 3 valve assemblies, and the subcooler inlet manifold, all essential parts of the fueling system that once kept Starship flying. The basket strainers filtered out debris and impurities in the fuel lines, protecting pumps and valves from damage. The valve assemblies controlled the flow of methane and liquid oxygen during tanking operations, while the subcooler inlet manifold distributed ultra-chilled liquid oxygen from the cooling units into the storage and transfer system. Together, these components formed the backbone of Pad 1's propellant supply chain. Now, they were gone, lifted away by cranes one after another, part of a fast, no-nonsense demolition campaign that began right after Flight 11. The The reason behind all this removal is simple restructuring the entire cryogenic pipeline system. Starship V3 will need a much faster propellant flow rate, up to 500 to 6,000 tons per hour, so the old setup just isn't enough anymore. To handle that, SpaceX is introducing a new quick-swap GSE module design. Instead of being permanently welded in place, key components like valves, filters, and manifolds are now mounted on mobile skids, which can be swapped out in just 24 to 48 hours. It's a smarter, faster, and much more flexible system. This upgrade also ties directly into SpaceX's plan to run Pad 1 and Pad 2 in parallel. Removing the old GSE is just the first step in mirroring Pad 2, so both launch pads can operate interchangeably using the same shared tank farm without needing any major reconfiguration between flights. Speaking of Launch Pad 1, major changes are already clearly visible, especially the orbital launch mount. Last week, crews started peeling away those big steel shields around it. Plasma torches have been running almost non-stop, cutting through the shielding, and those thick deck plates on top of the OLM ring. Bit by bit, they're exposing all the fuel lines inside so they can pull everything out. It's a slow job. The OLM's internal structure is insanely complex. They'll need a few more weeks to strip it down, make it lighter, and then start taking it apart, piece by piece, the ring, the 6 legs, the cooling system under the mount, even the deluge setup. All of this is to clear space for a brand new OLM, complete with a flame trench. So, why go through all this trouble? Because Starship V3 is on a whole new level. Its heavier runs on upgraded Raptor 3 engines and produces around 10,000 tons of thrust. That's an enormous amount of power. At ignition, the exhaust can reach 3,500 degrees, hot enough to melt steel in seconds. The old OLM simply couldn't handle that. The heat and acoustic shock alone could destroy piping valves, even the booster QD. The new setup, with a deeper and wider flame trench about 30 by 10 meters, will channel that plasma away from the pad, protecting everything around it. If the old pad was good for maybe 50 flights before needing a rebuild, this new one could go 10 times longer. Right above the OLM sits Mechazilla, and its massive catching arms, better known as the chopsticks, have recently caught everyone's attention. They've been marked with white paint lines, which likely means SpaceX isn't removing them completely, but rather cutting them shorter. From what it looks like, SpaceX might be planning to shorten Mechazilla's chopsticks from about 2 meters down to roughly 18 meters. A strategic change aimed at improving both efficiency and safety during booster catching and Starship stacking operations. According to the spaceflight community, the main reason behind this modification is to reduce dynamic load on the tower, increase catching precision, and improve control in high wind conditions. Shorter arms flex, less react, faster, and simply make the whole system safer. In fact, this new shorter chopstick design has already been implemented at both Pad 2 in Starbase and LC-39A in Florida, making it clear that SpaceX is moving toward a more standardized, refined Mechazilla setup across all sites. Now, speaking of Pad 2, SpaceX has really stepped up testing activity there lately, especially around the venting system and the water deluge setup. You can often see short venting bursts and small-scale water releases happening every few days. These tests are designed to make sure the system can safely and efficiently vent cryogenic gases, mainly liquid oxygen and liquid methane, from the storage tanks and plumbing lines without any blockages or unexpected pressure spikes. That might sound minor, but it's actually a critical part of launch safety. If the venting system doesn't work perfectly, pressure can build up inside the tanks, which could compromise the entire propellant loading process. So, SpaceX is carefully checking every component from valves and pipelines to each connection point to catch any potential weaknesses early on. And that's not all. Both booster quick disconnects at Pad 2 have been put through repeated testing just a few days ago. Those tests ran for hours. Typical SpaceX, extremely thorough. They're making sure each BQD can handle cryogenic pressure, reliably detach cleanly once fueling is complete, and respond precisely to automated commands. Now, here's something interesting. Unlike Pad 1, which only had 1 BQD, Pad 2 has 2. That's a major design improvement based on lessons learned from Pad 1. With 2 BQDs, SpaceX can fuel the booster much faster, which directly supports their long-term goal of rapid turnaround launches. So, Yeah, all signs point to a busier 2026 with more frequent Starship missions than ever before. Those are the latest updates from Starbase Texas. Now, let's move over to Florida, where things are getting even more exciting. On November 4th, SpaceX reached a major milestone in the Starship program by transporting the brand new orbital launch mount from the Roberts Road facility to Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center, Florida. This event marks a crucial step toward preparing for Starship launches from the East Coast, part of SpaceX's broader effort to expand operations beyond Starbase Texas. The new OLM is designed to support the fully stacked Starship vehicle. Compared to the OLM at Starbase's pad, this version appears far more complete, with pre-installed methane manifolds, quick disconnect systems, and plumbing connections that should significantly shorten setup time at LC-39A. The transport was carried out using self-propelled modular transporters, similar to those used at Starbase, requiring tight coordination with NASA security to clear the road, especially given the OLM's enormous size towering over streetlights and nearly blocking the view of the vehicle assembly building from certain angles. By the following day, November 5th, the structure was already lifted and placed onto its foundation. Crews are now expected to secure the legs, install propellant feed lines, and integrate the mount with the control and water systems. With less than 2 months left in 2025, it remains uncertain whether SpaceX can complete the installation before year's end. The company aims to conduct the first launch from LC-39A by summer 2026. Though several challenges remain, including the construction of a new tank farm and supporting infrastructure. For comparison, Starbase's Pad B OLM was transported nearly 6 months ago, but still lacks key components, whereas the LC-39A OLM looks more finalized, potentially shortening the timeline. Still, the Florida site has no complete tank farm yet, which could delay future operations if not addressed soon. Meanwhile, SpaceX faces growing pressure from NASA to accelerate Starship's development, especially as the agency reconsiders its Artemis III strategy amid schedule concerns, a situation that could open the door for competitors like Blue Origin. So, while Starship is expected to launch from LC-39A in 2026, SpaceX is also building 2 new launch pads at Space Launch Complex 37. This makes it clear that SLC-37 will play a major role in SpaceX's long-term expansion in Florida, possibly on a scale even larger than LC-39A, and comparable to Pad 1 and Pad 2 at Starbase. In SpaceX's latest HLS update, the company even hinted that SLC-37 will serve as the primary site for future lunar missions, noting rendering of future Starship launch pads planned for Space Launch Complex 37 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Development is still in its early stages, so information remains limited. However, reports indicate that 7 of the 9 tower modules for one of the launch towers at SLC-37 have already been assembled, impressive progress considering construction only began in June. According to documents from the U.S., Space Force and SpaceX, the first Starship launch from SLC-37 is currently scheduled for 2026, with the site expected to support up to 76 launches per year. To answer those questions, we need to go back to NASA's early days, a time when some of the wildest ideas in spaceflight history were born, and among them was one that stood out above all, a concept for a massive spacecraft called NOVA. The NOVA rocket was envisioned to carry between 10 and 20 astronauts at once, along with 75 to 100 tons of equipment and supplies. These gigantic landers would touch down entirely on the lunar surface and then launch back into orbit without leaving any hardware behind. A bold plan aimed at building permanent outposts, not just short visits. All of these ahead-of-its-time ideas came from Wernher von Braun, the legendary rocket engineer who played a key role in NASA's Apollo program. And it's no surprise that Elon Musk has often cited von Braun as one of his greatest inspirations. When you look at NOVA's original specifications, they sound strikingly familiar, almost like an early blueprint of what Starship has become today. All of this is true. You can actually find the official NOVA launch vehicle documents on NASA's own archives. Take a look. They were all publicly released back in 1963 and 1964, and the level of detail is mind-blowing. NASA engineers even drew out step-by-step diagrams showing exactly how the vehicle could be built. According to those early designs, Nova was a super heavy-lift launch vehicle, a 3-stage rocket that stood slightly taller than Saturn V, but was much wider in diameter. While Saturn V's first stage measured about 10 meters across, Nova's enormous first stage would stretch to 15 meters, providing space for gigantic fuel tanks and a massive cluster of engines. That first stage was planned to use 8 F1 engines, the same type that powered the Saturn V, but grouped together in an even larger cluster, producing an incredible 14 million pounds of thrust. And the second stage, just as impressive. It was designed to carry 8 J2 engines, generating more than 1.8 million pounds of thrust. The third stage, also powered by J2 or even larger M1 engines in some variants, served as the integrated propulsion unit for the lunar lander itself, not a crew compartment, but the engine and fuel backbone that allowed the entire 150 to 200-ton lander to descend and ascend intact. With that kind of power, Nova could carry payloads and crews far beyond what Saturn V was capable of. Its projected capabilities included landing 10 to 20 astronauts on the moon in a single mission, along with 60 tons or more of cargo, everything from habitats and rovers to life support infrastructure, all housed in a massive, self-contained lander mounted atop the third stage, where the crew lived, worked, and returned using the same vehicle that brought them there, without ever needing orbital refueling or rendezvous. But if the Nova concept was so brilliant, why was it canceled? The answer is surprisingly simple. The Nova project was officially scrapped in 1964, not because of a lack of ambition, but because NASA simply couldn't meet all 3 critical demands: time, cost, and technology. President Kennedy's goal was clear: land a man on the moon before 1970, a race driven by political and technological rivalry with the Soviet Union. But Nova, with its massive diameter, too many engines, the need for new factories, transport canals, and tens of billions of dollars in funding, would have taken at least 8 to 10 years to develop, far beyond the political deadline. Meanwhile, the Saturn V was smaller, simpler, and built on proven technology from the Jupiter program. The F1 and J2 engines were already showing success in early tests. And most importantly, NASA adopted the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous strategy, separating the main spacecraft from a lightweight lunar lander that would meet in lunar orbit. This new approach reduced launch mass by around 70% compared to Nova's direct ascent method, making the entire mission far more practical. Even Wernher von Braun, the father of Nova, publicly supported LOR in June 1963, declaring, "It's the only way to make it before 1970. And so, NASA shifted all its focus to Saturn V, turning an ambitious dream into a realistic plan. And just 5 years later, Apollo 11 made history by landing humans on the moon. In short, Nova wasn't a bad idea. It was just too far ahead of its time. That's why Elon Musk could absolutely bring it back to life in the form of Starship Nova, to make lunar landings easier than ever before. And in many ways, this time it would be much more doable, because Starship already surpasses what Nova was ever designed to achieve. Its fully reusable 2-stage architecture stands out, with the Super Heavy booster as the first stage, powered by 33 Raptor engines. Together, they generate more than 16 million pounds of thrust, easily surpassing the Nova's theoretical 13.9 million pounds from its 8 F1 engines. The second stage, Starship itself, carries 6 vacuum-optimized Raptors, producing 2.8 million pounds of thrust, more than double the power of Nova's second stage, which relied on 8 J2 engines generating about 1.86 million pounds. And in the future, this upper stage could even use up to 9 Raptors, making it even more powerful. The only major change would be structural instead of the original 2-stage configuration. Starship Nova would feature a 3-stage design. And interestingly, SpaceX wouldn't even need to add an adapter to dock a 3rd stage on top of the Starship upper stage, because that stage could actually fit inside Starship's massive payload bay. However, building an entirely new 3rd stage would take a lot of time, effort, and money. So instead, the idea is to use the upper stage of another vehicle, like the Centaur 3 used on ULA's Vulcan rocket, which could easily fit within Starship's enormous payload compartment. A Centaur stage, with its slender design and high-efficiency RL-10 engine, could provide valuable flexibility for lunar transfer or interplanetary missions. In fact, by clustering 4 RL-10 engines together, a modified Centaur upper stage could deliver around 96,000 pounds of thrust. Quite an impressive figure by today's standards. However, when compared to the planned third stage of Nova, powered by a single J2 engine, Centaur falls short. The J2, which also burns liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, produces far greater thrust, reaching up to 232,000 pounds. This large gap highlights the current limitations of upper stage technology when it comes to achieving the kind of deep space, heavy lift capability envisioned for Nova or a modified Starship. Moreover, even if the size and thrust match, there are still some major drawbacks. For example, Centaur and Starship belong to 2 different companies, ULA and SpaceX, and direct collaboration between them would be very difficult without a third party, like NASA, acting as a mediator. Moreover, to actually match or surpass Nova's ambitions, any potential third stage added to Starship would likely need to go beyond the existing Centaur-class designs. That could mean reviving high-performance engines like NASA's shelved J2X, or exploring next-generation nuclear thermal propulsion systems, which NASA already has on its roadmap for future deep space missions. In general, a third stage could save a lot of money. Basically, it would be a smaller Starship without the heat shield, aeroshell, landing legs, or extra tanks, so it would cost a lot less to build than a full Starship/Super Heavy system. High delta-V missions aren't super common right now, so it might take a while before the investment really pays off. But with Starship's insanely low launch cost, demand could pick up eventually, even if it takes a few years. Government agencies like NASA and the U.S. Space Force are the main customers for high delta-V missions, like flying directly to geostationary orbit or heading to other planets. They might even help fund the development of this third stage. Aside from the upper stage issue, there's another crucial factor Starship would need to change to truly become a Nova Starship: its choice of propellant. As space agencies and private companies set their sights on building a sustainable human presence on the Moon, the choice of fuel becomes a critical part of mission design. For lunar operations, hydrolox, the combination of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, remains the most practical and efficient option, especially when considering future in-situ resource utilization. One of the Moon's most valuable natural resources is its vast reserves of water ice, found mainly in the permanently shadowed regions near the lunar poles. This ice can be extracted, refined, and split through electrolysis to produce both hydrogen and oxygen, allowing hydrolox fuel to be manufactured directly on the lunar surface. That capability would drastically reduce the need to haul fuel from Earth, cutting mission costs and enabling long-term lunar operations. In contrast, methane-based engines like SpaceX's Raptor are optimized for Mars missions, where methane can be synthesized from atmospheric carbon dioxide and subsurface ice via the Sabatier process. But since the Moon lacks a carbon-rich atmosphere, producing methane there simply isn't practical. Without the ability to generate local methane, lunar missions relying on Methalox engines would face major logistical challenges for return trips and surface operations, as every drop of propellant would have to be transported from Earth, an extremely costly and limiting approach. For that reason, upper stages and landers intended for sustained lunar activity would be far better served by hydrolox propulsion systems. These engines not only deliver higher performance in the vacuum of space, but could also one day be refueled directly on the Moon. Integrating hydrolox-based propulsion into Starship's architecture, or pairing Starship with a hydrolox upper stage for lunar missions, would align far more closely with the long-term vision of a self-sufficient lunar infrastructure and permanent human outposts on the Moon. Finally, converting Starship into a Nova-class heavy-lift transporter could bring significant advantages for deep space missions, particularly in terms of payload capacity and mission simplicity. A Nova-class Starship variant, whether through increased thrust, a third stage, or both, could deliver 68 tons or more to translunar injection orbit in a single launch, without any in-orbit refueling. That capability instantly outperforms NASA's Space Launch System, which currently delivers a maximum of about 38 tons to TLI. This leap in capability would greatly streamline lunar missions. With just one launch, Starship could carry larger, fully equipped lunar landers, heavy cargo, and multi-astronaut crews, achieving the goals of the original Artemis missions and beyond.